Hello, everybody. I asked a question, and I see so many people are asking the same question. What is this being thing? Because we sometimes we say we are being busy or we are being this or that. What is in essence? What is being in essence? And if we look at the level of consciousness or the map of consciousness and the levels of consciousness, then it can be easily understood what are the different levels of being. And it is quite amazing when we look at it from the consciousness perspective or the map of consciousness perspective, then it makes so much sense and it becomes quite clear what it is and how it works and how you can move from one to the other. So I've prepared this training so that people can have a better idea. I offer it as a possibility. If it works for you, it's brilliant. If it doesn't work, it's also brilliant. But maybe, just maybe, it can give you a better understanding. I know it helps a few people that I've had the pleasure to explain this to from this perspective. So please enjoy my offering here of the fields of consciousness or the fields of being. Off with the fields of being. You'll see the SQ in action is spiritual intelligence, and it's an intelligence of spirituality. How do we can understand spirituality, which is the first principle of who we are. We are spirits, and we have a human experience. I know we emphasize emotional experience, but my question was always, what goes deeper? What is deeper than emotional intelligence? And it was spiritual intelligence. It became to me quite a journey. The first principle is everything is consciousness, and your life is an expression of consciousness. So what is consciousness? And if you look at Nikola Tesla and Einstein, they both had the same idea. Tesla said that if you want to find the secrets of the universe, think in terms of energy, frequency, and vibration. And Einstein said everything is energy, and that is all there is to it. Match the frequency of the reality, what you want, and you cannot help but get it in reality. It can be no other way. This is not a philosophy, this is physics. And through the days now, we see more and more quantum physics people coming along and confirming what ancient knowledge have been saying for centuries. And many of the esoteric teachings, and even from the scripture that everybody reads, the Bible, there are many correlations between the science and the philosophy and the ancient mysticism. So let's look at the fields of consciousness. And the principle there is that your life is an expression of consciousness. Okay? Consciousness happens without your help. It doesn't. We don't help consciousness from happening. It is happening. It's expressing in any way. That is why you can see all kinds of different kind of people all over the world. The difference is which area or which level of consciousness or field of being are they connecting to. Okay. So the thing is, you do not control consciousness, but you can connect to it on purpose. It is possible to do that. Of course, we are told that we can't do that, and we were never told how to do that, because there's a very good reason because of that. So we hear in the woo speak a lot about change your vibration. And I remember hearing this a lot of times and thinking, what does it mean? I have no clue what this means. So can you please help me understand this? And let's have a look at how you do this, or how does it work? The fields are quantum fields. These are energy fields at different levels of vibration. And some of them are life-enhancing, life-diminishing, but we'll get to this in a moment. So in these fields, you have thoughts. And those thoughts are according to its kind. You have stories, which are thoughts strung together to get some kind of a story, okay? And then you have imaginations, the way we see the world and we see ourselves in the world. Even though that has been, every thought that has been thunk at any level of consciousness is within these fields. Okay, thoughts are energy packaged and languaged. So let's unpack that for a moment. A thought is nothing but energy. And it's an energy that is filled with information, and then it is packaged as language. And that is what we get. When we get a thought, we hear some kind of a language or a feeling of a language, and when we connect to a thought, this is something that speaks in your head, and then when we connect to it, it begins to be effective. Okay, so the fields of consciousness are either life-enhancing, in other words, that is higher consciousness. And then you have lower consciousness, which is life-diminishing, right? Higher consciousness is then, if you want to listen to the words and you just get the feeling, higher consciousness is willingness, neutrality, acceptance, reason, love, joy, peace, enlightenment. Those are higher consciousness, higher vibrations of consciousness, higher energy. They are all life-enhancing energies. Okay, then you have life-diminishing energies, which are pride and anger. If you just want to, go through this slowly and get a feeling of the meaning, you can actually, it's quite easy to experience that feeling of the word behind the word. So there we have pride and anger and desire and fear and grief and apathy and guilt and shame. And then you have in the middle, which is a very interesting subject that we will be speaking to quite a lot. It is called courage. I was actually, when I was typing this up, I put in dividing line, and for some reason it came out divining line, which is actually a very interesting slip. I don't know what to call it, but let's see what it is. All right, so let us imagine, just imagine for a moment, these fields of consciousness are like sports fields. So we use these 6 fields: a hockey field, the rugby field, the rugby league field, which is basically the same field. Then top left, top right, you have the soccer field, American gridiron, and at the bottom you have the Australian Football League, which is called footy. Very interesting sport. Can also be very violent. All of them can be, even hockey. So then, what is the thing that's similar with all of them? They all played with a ball, and most of those balls are the same shape, except soccer and hockey. Of course, the South African ball is on top there. I have to be loyal. And you'll see the gridirons at the bottom, the rugby league, and then Australian football rules. Okay, so they are all the same and different. They have a different style of play, a way of playing. They have different rules that are adhered to and enforced. You can't enforce rugby rules on soccer, and you won't have a soccer player playing rugby very successfully, especially if they're rather small. So they have a different language in that sport. If you listen to the way they speak about the sport and all the rules and how they express themselves, they can have the same emotion, but the language is different. And then you have different players, soccer versus rugby. If you look at the rugby players of today, they are massive and huge people, and the gridiron people are even bigger. And they count on their strength. And some of them in the positions, they play for agility. So they're not so big, but they're very fast and very strong. But the big boys in the middle, they are always very strong and heavy guys. Or women, you get that too. Okay. And then you have a different crowd for every kind of sport. So it's like a collective consciousness for that sport. If you can imagine at a rugby game, how the people go on, and you don't really, depending on which country you're in South Africa, New Zealand, Australia, they're very noisy, but they don't sing much. In the soccer people, they sing quite a lot. And it's interesting to watch the crowds interacting and the way that the people actually become so enthusiastic about the sport. And yeah, and then you have the different referees, different kinds of referees. Let's have a look at different kinds of referees. There you go. Top left is a soccer guy. Scary, dude. And then you have bottom left, you have the footy refs. Very interesting. They just point. They run around pointing. And then you have the rugby guys, the bottom right, and then the American football on the left-hand top. And then you have this guy. He plays in footy. Okay, this is Australia. Now imagine we take these fields and we stack them on top of each other, right? So we stack them one on top of the other and we give each a name. So let's look at the lower consciousness. We have pride, which is very demanding. It's a demanding type of consciousness. You have anger, which is antagonistic in its nature. You have desire, which is disappointing, and it usually comes from disappointment, and it causes disappointment. And then you have fear, which makes life frightening and scary. Grief, which makes life tragic, and we experience tragedy at the point of grief. And then apathy, which is hopelessness, and something that is very difficult to get out of. But it also has a very interesting function in consciousness because it protects you from the bottom two, which is interesting. Guilt, evil, we see the life as evil, and shame, we see the life as miserable. So why am I saying apathy is hopelessness and it protects you from guilt and shame? As in apathy, you switch off and you totally, you go offline in apathy. It is quite a lesson to go through, quite a lot of information there, but we will go through it in one of the other lessons. But at the end of the day, where most of the people in the world, about 80% of people in the world live at this level of consciousness, at these levels. There's a collective consciousness that is driven from pride, anger, desire, fear, grief, apathy, guilt, and shame. And narcissism, they say, which is the lowest expression of consciousness, is shame-based. It looks like it's pride, very demanding, very wonderful, and very beautiful. But at the end of the day, deep down inside, it is shame-based. Okay? We'll get into that at the later stage in a different video. That is lower consciousness. So what do you experience in lower consciousness? You experience scorn, where people take on each other, hate, you have regret, you have anxiety, and you have despair. And then you have humiliation. Now, just going over those words, just looking at those words, it is quite scary just to consider the words themselves. I think like, oh, no, it is quite hectic just to consider these words. All right. What happens in lower consciousness? There are three things that happens quite a lot, and it's compare, compete, and convince. So we compare each other, ourselves with other people, and we compare our thoughts with what we think other people are thinking, and then we get to judgment. And then, of course, we need to compete because we need to show to them that we are better than they think we are, and we have to we have to prove ourselves worthy, and we have to prove ourselves that we are these amazing people, but we are really very scared that people will see that we are seeing ourselves as insignificant. And then the convincing bit. The convincing bit is trying to prove that we are good enough. We have to prove to other people, we have to convince them in a way that we are good enough. All right, so in lower consciousness is battle for significance amongst the insignificant people who see themselves as insignificant. And that's what I call 𝒂𝒃𝒂𝒃. That's a whole body of work that includes looking at the 𝒂𝒃𝒂𝒃ians, the people who live there, and their expression, how they behave, not why they behave that way, because we can understand from that level of consciousness, or from those levels of consciousness, why they behave the way they do. So it's not a very big discovery to make, but it is very powerful. So in lower consciousness, the three controlling entities are fear, greed, and indoctrination. I'm not going to go into this too much detail, otherwise I'm going to keep you here for 3 hours. Okay, so we'll get into that in one of the other lessons. So what do you find in the fields? You find thoughts, you find ways of behavior, and that's the only thing we can see that people do. You can see their behavior, and you have to discern. I'm not saying judge. You have to discern what's going on there. And when you get to a point of I can see you, I call it that, then you can see, okay, fine, this is what's coming out there, and this is the way people are going about their lives. And it's not about judgment, it's about discernment and to see, because sometimes you don't need to be in the surroundings or the presence of people like that. Okay, then language, the way they speak, the language they use, their body language, their emotional language, all of that, you can see very clearly that there's something going on. And then in lower consciousness, the words misery loves company is absolutely true, and it actually shows up as clumping. I call it clumping, where these people, they will stick together. And in this sticking together, it's not a community. These people are always going at each other, and it's interesting to see, but not pleasant to experience. What people in lower consciousness experience mostly is disconnectedness. They're disconnected from their higher self, and they think that life happens to them. Now, the experience of life happening to you is actually quite true, and it's quite accurate to say that people are thinking that life is happening to them because they cannot understand that life is actually happening through them. Okay? Now, the difference between lower and higher consciousness is higher consciousness is an extension of universal energy, and lower consciousness is a projection of lower energy. It's projection. It uses your own energy to project anger, to generate anger, and then you throw it at someone else through a fight or whatever. And then when they reciprocate with picking a fight with you or responding to your fighting prompting, then what happens is they will actually fight back at you, and that's an exchange of energy, which is then the way that we look at relationships. A relationship is an exchange of energy. So now you have people fighting with each other, and then you will see that a fight doesn't always last all that long, because what happens is people run out of energy, because you are using your own psychic energy and your psychological energy to fight with a person, or to be as mean as you can, and you can't keep on doing that for long periods of time because you run out of energy. But that's a different thing for a different time. And even the music, you can hear the difference in the music when you excuse me, when you have some of the music. I like hard rock, so you get hard rock that's not so hectic, and then you get the hectic stuff, which is all anger and spite and fearsomeness and so on, and you can feel the energy in that music. But of course, when you're living in apathy or in shame, then it actually it makes you angry, which then lifts you up, which is, of course, it's quite amazing to see that. And we'll dive into this map of consciousness way more in detail in future videos. And then you have a thing called spite. Spite is like something that you see very often in the lower level of consciousness. Spite, where people will just get at each other so that we can diminish them. And then, needless to say, there's greed. I want mine, and I want yours too. You must give me yours, and I am not going to do anything to get it to, to respond in kind for you. So now the divining line, this is the very interesting one. People need encouragement more than advice. This is a saying that I've heard from Eric Lofholm quite a lot. He made this famous, I should say. And what happens is, it is a place of the quantum switch where we go from small self to larger self, to big self, to being, where we go from diminishing to life enhancing. It is also the switch from making to creating. In lower consciousness, we make trouble, of course. There's quite there, and we all live there at times. So we go from making to creating. Creating is where life creates itself through you. Okay, you are a conduit, you are a vessel for the creative powers to come through you, and you are the hands of the Creator, if I can put it like that. And it is a very profound way of living to be a creator. And I'm not talking about artistic people only. Everybody is essentially a creator because we were made in the image of the Creator. So we are creating all the time. And especially things like relationships, we can create them because by the words we speak, abracadabra, if we speak the words into being, in the beginning was the Word, and the Word was God, and the Word was with God, or the other way around. So this is where we get to the divining line, where we switch from the one to the other. This is where vitality comes into play, and courage is like a battery. And I'm not going to go into a lot of detail here, but it is where you get the divining line between encouragement and discouragement. If you go into lower consciousness, you discourage people, their vitality decreases. If you encourage people by acknowledging them and being at peace with them and allowing them to be as they are, then you encourage people, and then their vitality increases. And as their vitality increases, they can go into higher levels of consciousness. And that's, of course, called courage. It is a magnificent way of how the whole process and the whole structure of consciousness works. It is quite amazing to experience these kind of things. Okay, so let's look at higher consciousness. And we start at the bottom, of course, because it's life enhancing. And that's where neutrality comes in. That's where you stop taking positions and having opinions, because you can only observe behavior. The willingness is the second one. And willingness is the declaration that I use quite often. If I don't have an answer and I say, I do not know, I am willing to learn, please show me. And then when you do that kind of thing, and you say it from your heart, not from your head, then the automagic begins to happen. And it is quite amazing to watch how you are led, how you are taken on a little journey. If it's a long journey or a small journey, it doesn't matter. But you are taking on this little journey of discovery. And it is actually quite amazing. Then acceptance is when you accept that life is the way life is, amongst other things. And the acceptance is accepting yourself as you are. Okay? The next one is a reason. A reason is about understanding and being able to reason about things. In lower consciousness can't reason. They're either right, they are right and you are wrong. That's basically how it works. My way or the highway kind of attitude. But when you get to reason, then you can sit and discuss and have a discussion without being offended, because you are living in acceptance, willingness, and neutrality. You see, when the higher you go, if you get to reason, then acceptance, willingness, neutrality is available to you. Okay, the others do, but it tends to work in a kind of not hierarchy, but you switch from one to the other. The higher you go, the more the other one switches on and works in you, through you. Then you have, of course, love. Love is a very splendid thing, and it is a vibration of all the others at the bottom, down, and then, of course, then joy. I'm going to go into love, but it's such a massive subject that we will go into it at a later stage. And then you have joy. Joy that comes from you, not to you. It's not happiness. It's not happiness. It's joy. Happiness is circumstantial, where you are happy because circumstances are cool and they work for you and it looks like life is cool. But then when life is not cool anymore, then you're not happy anymore. Okay? Joy comes through you, and it is a divine gift that flows through you. And what happens is, when you think of the word enjoyment, when you walk into a situation or a place with joy, then you are bringing enjoyment into the situation. Okay? I know Steve Hardison is talking about lovement, so which is cool. So enjoyment is not how you perceive it, but what you bring into it. And then my own favorite is peace. Peace that transcends all human understanding. And you can't understand this because you have to experience that peace. And it sometimes feels like nothing. Now, when you are used to living in chaos and your life is difficult and not working really well, then what happens is the peace goes, and you have this awareness of chaos that's around you, and how can I say, all the lower consciousness, the fear, the anger, the spite, the grief, everything just goes on, and it causes so much chaos in your body. Your nervous system packs up, and goes into shutdown to try and protect you from these negative energies. But when you get to the peace, and all of that disappears, and all of that is gone, and it feels like you're feeling nothing. It feels almost as if you've unplugged. It feels like you've gone offline. So that's the hecticness of peace, and it is so amazing. And the amazing thing that comes out of peace is there is an automatic outflow of gratitude. That is something that I've experienced myself, and I've seen this happen where people experience that peace when we do sessions, the sessions that I do, and they experience that peace. And the words are always, "Thank you, God." And it is amazing to see this happening, and this is without any prompting, where this kind of thing happens. And then you have enlightenment. This is the highest level of consciousness. This is where Jesus, Buddha, and all the sages lived or live. The energy is still here, of course. We know that from quantum physics. The energy has never left. That's why it says that I am with you always. So this enlightenment is when the universe disappears. You can sometimes go into it at times, and it is quite amazing to experience. I've had 3 or 4 of those, and it's been absolutely amazing where the universe disappears. There is nothing. It is a void, but it is a void that is not empty. It is a void that is empty, and it's also full with everything that there is in the universe. It is quite amazing. You have to experience this. All right. So what do you find in this higher consciousness field? Let me just go back there. You have the presence, and the presence is this presence of the spirit, and you have to experience this. It's almost impossible to explain this. And then you have a reverence and awe at life, where you look at life and you realize that you are part of such enormous, endless being that this is flowing through you. And then, as I said, their gratitude is a byproduct of peace. And there's a scripture that says, joy unspeakable and full of glory, which is actually quite correct. That joy bubbles up in you. And I remember the times that I've experienced pure joy was so awesome. You have this bubbling up in you, and of course you can't hold on to it because it's come to pass. It doesn't come to stay, but that little encounter with joy is so awesome. It just blows your mind, and it like changes your life for the moment, and for the very few moments afterwards, where you just have this remembrance of amazing joy. In this field, you actually experience a forgiveness, and I'll just stick on that for a moment. This forgiveness is the understanding that there is nothing to forgive, because you are not holding on to anything. Forgiveness is a natural outflow where you can actually feel the forgiveness flowing through you, where you just let go of everything, because when you're in higher consciousness, especially when you get to the top ones, then you realize there's nothing to forgive and there's no one to judge, because everybody's life is an expression of consciousness. And in this expression of consciousness, what is happening there is those people are just expressing that consciousness. Sometimes they aren't even aware of that. So judging them is kind of pointless. It is not about forgiving them. or tolerating. It's not about tolerating the horrible behavior that can sometimes come out, and sometimes you have to like love them from a distance, which is very practical in some cases, especially if it's dangerous for you. But forgiveness is a state of consciousness. It is a state where you just allow and you see where you don't need to, you begin to discern. You don't have to judge. And when you can discern and you can pick up and you see, this is not good for me, without any judgment, you can remove yourself from a situation without any judgment, without saying anything nasty, mean, or spiteful. You can just excuse yourself and you can leave. And then, of course, the peace that transcends all understanding. And it is truly, truly, truly the peace that totally understands. And then you get another byproduct of this level of consciousness is trust. It is not blind trust. It is a state of consciousness of trust. And that trust comes from the inside, where you look at life and you know that you are being looked after, that you're not alone, you're not walking through this life alone, and that you are a child of the Most High Divine. When you have reached that level of consciousness and you begin to live in that more and more, we don't always stay there, unfortunately, but when you get to this level of consciousness, life is awesome. You can trust and you can know. Something that also kinds of pops up in this kind of consciousness is mission. And it's an experience where your mission comes to get you. I'm not going to explain this now, but it is very, very profound and very interesting to experience. All right. So how do you shift fields? I think we're on 31 minutes now. So shifting fields is through encouragement. How do you get someone to shift from one field to another? Is encouragement. Acceptance. Accept someone for who they are. When you accept them, you make them feel safe. And when we as coaches work with people, the first thing we need to do is to make the people feel safe, because they come from a place where they don't feel safe, especially if they have undergone humongous life quakes where the life has gone totally to pieces or something gone wrong and so on. You have to get to the place of acceptance, accepting the people as they are in front of you. It's a place of connection where you feel really connected to someone. That is where you connect to their higher consciousness from your higher consciousness, and you become one. This is where you experience the oneness that everybody looks for and promotes the idea of, and yet very seldom actually achieve, because you have disconnection from most people. And then what happens is, and it's amazing to see this, the trigger points change. Where someone used to be triggered about something, they can now say, I see you, but you don't trigger me anymore. And I use this this comes about in the work that I do with people when they have gone through life quakes. Excuse me. And when they have been through this amazing life quakes, which are rather terrible, what happens is the trigger points change. They don't get triggered so easily by something that happened in the past. It's quite astounding to watch and to experience with people. More about this later. And then, as I said, gratitude is a byproduct of peace. If you are living in peace and you have gratitude towards another person, they can feel it. Okay? This is a feeling. This is an experience. And then the mindfulness, also known as awareness for me, this is where you shift people into fields when you lift them up. And then self-care. There are different ways of self-care, which is opposed to self-obsession, which all comes from not being good enough, and I have to be obsessed by myself, with myself. Okay. Transcending, life happens through you, not to you or by you. Life happens through you. This is a profound switch that people undergo. And the second one is you are not alone in this. When you read in many of like the Course in Miracles, you read about in the Way of Mastery, you see that you do a certain number of steps and the final step is not yours. And that is quite amazing to understand that and experience that, where something that you've been struggling with, and you go through a dark night of the soul or three, and then suddenly one day you either wake up in the morning and now, poof, everything has just changed. That is amazing to have that experience. Okay. Change the play and change the actor. What it means is when you stop playing at a lower level of consciousness, you stop playing the game of life, then you change the actor, the way that you play, the character that you begin to play in the world. Because life in essence is a stage, and depending on what kind of character you play, that'll depend on the level of consciousness that you are in. And then one thing you understand more and more deeply when you get into to understand these is life is about experience, not accumulation. So you can experience many things, but experiences are fleeting. One of my most amazing experiences was I wanted to go to the Sagrada Familia in Barcelona, and I went in there, and it was a beautiful experience to see this amazing, majestic church and experience that wasn't finished then yet, but to experience this grand, amazing place. And then when it was finished, it was finished. So we walk out there and it's done. But you always have the memory. You always have the memory of the experience. You can't take the church with you, but you can take the memory with you, which is quite awesome. And then everything comes to pass and nothing comes to stay. And that is so important for us to understand, that in the nature of consciousness, everything comes to pass. Nothing comes to stay. And you must be willing to let go of even joy so that you can experience more joy, or you can experience more peace. And you must be able, and you must be willing, again, willingness, you must be willing to let go of the anger, of the fear, of the hate, of all those things. You have to be willing to let go of that so that you can shift to higher levels where you can get into neutrality, acceptance, and willingness, and joy, peace, and love. And then you must understand, and you will get to understand as you go on this journey, is that you are divine by design. There is no question about it. There is no, when you begin to experience these higher level of consciousness, then you realize you are divine by design, and you are called to live by that design. You are made to be a creator, and your depression will go away very quickly when you begin to create. I have not seen anybody who's made the switch from maker to creator perpetuate their ADD and depression. So I'm not a psychologist and I'm not a doctor and I can't diagnose, but this is what I've seen in many times that I've worked with people. All right. So that is it. Thank you so much. I just want to reiterate the mission of the Light Express is to expand the human consciousness so that you can discover who you were made to be, so that you can take back your life. You reinvent yourself as a 2.0 version of you, a 2.0 version which is connected to higher consciousness, to your higher self, and to live from that space and to live in that place. And life becomes a wondrous journey. Thank you so much. Many blessings and lots of love.